Amazing twist. A poor girl's touching lesson transforms a millionaire actor's life in 30 days. Maggie Thompson wiped the last trace of grease from the counter and glanced at the diner clock, the hands creeping past 5 p.m. The day had dragged on, her mind swirling with thoughts far beyond the sizzling burgers and swirling coffee cups. She stifled a sigh, grappling with the weight of responsibility. At 17, she was already the anchor of her little family, her mother's chronic illness casting a long shadow over their lives. Struggling financially, Maggie alternated between part-time jobs, the diner just one piece in a complex puzzle of survival. Yet, within that hard shell of duty, a writer's heart beat fiercely, glimmering with dreams of penning words that could transform lives, including her own. The diner door swung open with a familiar jingle, but nothing prepared Maggie for the sight that followed. Jake Reynolds, the A-list actor, walked in, an oasis of celebrity amidst the mundane. The ambiance thickened with every sighing breath, the chatter of patrons fading as whispers sparked. But for Maggie, the world around her blurred. She couldn't allow herself to be captivated, not when life was a constant survival game. Yet as she approached him with her trademark smile, she felt a strange pull. Here was someone who had everything she desired, but his downcast eyes told another story. "You're a long way from Hollywood," Maggie teased, her voice holding a hint of disbelief. The moment was electric, a collision of two disparate worlds. With each laugh shared over greasy fries and absent-minded coffee refills, she felt a connection she'd never dared to hope for. He listened intently. Her stories about life in the diner bounced off his worn heart. And then, he proposed a mentorship, a 30-day journey into each other's realities. Suddenly, the enchanting idea morphed into a heavy burden. The weight of her world pressed into her chest. Could she truly pull back the veneer of her life? Let him see her struggles? Would he understand the endless cycle of bills, her exhaustion as she juggled school and work, all the sacrifices she made for her mother? Afraid to reveal too much, Maggie wrestled with the idea that maybe she wasn't enough. How could a Hollywood star like Jake truly see value in a girl like her? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With their laughter echoing in her mind, Maggie felt the stakes rise. She was being pulled into a world that glittered, but was swathed in shadows. She could sense the judgment brewing among Jake's Hollywood friends, the whispered comments about her being just a waitress, the anxious specter of their differing backgrounds looming over her. Yet the thought of independence from her stagnant life was intoxicating. What if their friendship transcended that judgment, morphing into something beautiful? Jake's agent called, a chilling voice reminding Maggie of her place in this unyielding dynamic. Tension frayed at her edges. When revelations about her family's hidden truths spiraled in, echoes of disloyalty and regret, her world tilted violently, leading her to question everything she stood for. Would she have to forfeit her burgeoning bond with Jake to protect her fragile self? Night fell over the small town, but the storm in Maggie raged on. Each decision held the potential to change her life forever, yet every flicker of hope was overshadowed by doubt. Would she shrink back, shackled by her fears of inadequacy, or dare to grasp the hand reaching out from another universe? Born of hardship and yet aching for something more, she stood at a precipice, heart racing, knowing that the truth would either bind them together or shatter the delicate threads between them forever. Maggie paced around her small room, the dim light casting long shadows against the walls lined with half-finished notebooks. Each page bore witness to her hopes, etched in earnest script. But today, they felt like the echoes of another life. The weight of Jake's offer pressed against her chest, forcing her to confront the buzzing uncertainty dwelling in her mind. Could she really open up to him? Share her burdens? She remembered his eyes, haunted yet kind, as he sought a truth in her laughter. The allure of possibility whispered seductive promises, but they were married tightly to risk. What if he could not grasp the raw edges of her reality? What if he turned away in pity, in disbelief? With each spiral of thought, her heart tightened, though a flicker of determination ignited deep within her. Maggie grabbed her worn journal, flipping to one of the blank pages. What would she write? A poem, a story, perhaps an echo of her struggles. Below the surface of self-doubt, the flickers of hope danced, urging her to claim her narrative. Maybe this mentorship wasn't just about revealing herself to him, but about finding courage within her own skin. Ink flowed, but words twisted into confessions. The pain of late nights spent worrying about bills dissolved into descriptions of dreams entwined with reality. Writing became her armor. She realized that every story shared was an act of bravery, a journey toward authenticity. After hours lost in her thoughts, Maggie closed the journal, steeling herself for what lay ahead. A commitment loomed, and she felt the fiery need to weave Jake into her world, to push the limits of vulnerability. As days drifted, the clock ticking toward their starting date, Maggie became a silent observer of the world. Time took on a different rhythm, a pulse that thrummed with potential. Conversations with her friends at the diner grew heavy with implications. They offered fragments of encouragement but were tinged with skepticism. She sensed the weight of their distrust, their unasked questions hammering away at her resolve. If she stepped into the unknown with Jake, their perceptions could shift, but at what cost? The day finally arrived. Maggie hesitated before leaving for the diner, her heart racing at the thought of seeing Jake again. Would this be the moment she would unveil herself or retreat behind the curtains of doubt? She pictured him sitting there, expectation written on his face, waiting for her to reveal this hidden world through her eyes. Stepping inside was a plunge into the contrasting energies of their lives, a mixture of grease and glamour, survival and poignancy. There he was, leaning against the counter, exuding a charisma that made her stomach flutter yet filled her with trepidation. "Maggie," he greeted, that smile dispelling the shadows of her fears. "Are you ready for this?" She breathed deeply, uncertainty lingering like a specter but tinged with excitement. Their pact meant unveiling more than herself. It meant stretching beyond what she had thought possible. "I am," she whispered, finding that within the grains of fear lay the seeds of adventure. But as they spoke, engaging in small talk that barely skimmed the surface, something unsettling stirred in her. What was it that he truly sought in this arrangement? Was it his own metamorphosis, or the chance to fix someone from a broken world? The questions rippled beneath their laughter, darkening the golden threads of connection. In that moment she realized she would have to confront not only the truths of her life, but also the unexplored territories of his. Boundaries blurred, and she found herself on the brink of revelation. She could either let the fear of inadequacy swallow her whole or stand firm and demand the authenticity they both required. "Jake," Maggie began, her voice steady yet quivering with the depths of unleashed emotion. "What do you really want from this?" The silence that followed hung thick in the air, a terrible tension crystallizing between them, as their worlds seemed to collide. Would they both confront the deeper truths hidden beneath their glamour and grime? Or would the bonds they forged become the threads that ultimately pulled them apart? Maggie's heart raced, her question lingering like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples of uncertainty through the air. Jake's eyes, momentarily wide with surprise, narrowed as he took a breath, clearly weighing his words. The pause stretched, thick with tension, and she could see a flicker of conflict in his expression, as if he were straddling his own invisible line of vulnerability. "I want to understand," he finally replied, his voice a low murmur that felt both intimate and daunting. "But understanding always comes at a cost. I can't pretend to know what your life is like, Maggie. Maybe I want to find a piece of myself in your story." Her insides twisted at his admission. Was this really about self-discovery or merely a means to distract from his own struggles? The thought put a bitter edge on her understanding. She had never considered herself as a reflection of someone else's journey. Yet here they were, two disparate lives colliding over coffee and unspoken truths. Maggie took a breath and leaned closer, an impulsive move, driven by the need for honesty. Understanding isn't a one-way street, Jake. I can't be the only one laying bare my truths. If we're going to do this, you need to meet me halfway. She watched as his expression shifted. Surprise etched into his features, then deep contemplation as the weight of her request settled. Okay, he said slowly. But that means sharing things I've kept hidden too. My past isn't pretty. She nodded, the urgency within her growing. I think it's necessary to share our burdens so we can carry them together. Her words echoed with a clarity that surprised even her. In that exchange, the boundaries they had tiptoed around started to blur, carving a fragile but significant bond between their disparate realities. Maggie felt empowered with each second that ticked by, fueled by the undeniable need to emerge from the cocoon of fear she had woven around herself. She wasn't just a girl from a rundown diner anymore. She was more than her circumstances, and that realization lit a fire within her. As their conversation deepened, Maggie shared snippets of her world, the gnawing anxiety about finances, the feeling of endless cycles dragging her down. Each confession seemed to lift a weight off her shoulders, one she hadn't realized she was carrying. Jake listened intently, his gaze unwavering, and she noticed how he began to lean in, as if her truths were drawing him closer. Your dreams are valid, Maggie, he asserted at one point, breaking through the walls of her self-doubt. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. His sincerity struck a chord, resonating with an authority she found reassuring. It was the first time someone saw her as she truly was, a mosaic of complexity and struggle, yet still aspiring. Just as she was beginning to process this shift in their dynamic, Jake confided a piece of his own history, the pressures of being under constant scrutiny, and the isolation that came with fame. I sometimes feel like I'm performing in a role that doesn't even reflect who I am, he admitted, his voice tinged with honesty. It's exhausting. In that mutual revelation, Maggie felt a rush of empathy as well as clarity. Here stood not just a million-dollar actor, but a man grappling with his own insecurities. Suddenly, their worlds seemed less divided. Could vulnerability become a valuable resource for change, for them both? Together, they began to map out their plan. They would peel back layers they had both hidden for so long. They would not only challenge each other's fears but support a mutual understanding as they ventured into the uncharted territory of their shared journey. Each session, each shared vulnerability would be a step toward real-life transformation, not just for one but for both. Yet, as they planned for their next meeting, a lurking doubt crept back into Maggie's mind. What if, beyond their shared ambitions, they stumbled upon truths that felt insurmountable? What secrets might surface that could drive a wedge instead of forge connection? Maggie. His voice pulled her back to the present, breaking through her spiraling thoughts. Let's promise to be honest, no matter how difficult it gets. Agreed? She nodded, determination coursing through her. But this commitment, she felt, a willingness to be real, would unravel more than she expected. Her resolve was firm, but a flicker of trepidation lingered. Sometimes the truth could be a double-edged sword. Would they both be ready to face what lay beneath their layers, or would they uncover wounds too deep to heal? As they bid each other goodbye, a whisper of excitement churned in her gut, accompanied by a familiar ache of fear. She was about to embark on a transformative journey, but the question loomed. Would they emerge stronger, or would the very act of unveiling their truths threaten to pull them apart? Maggie's nights became restless as she wrestled with her burgeoning goals. Sitting in her dimly lit apartment, the walls closed in with memories that haunted her. The echoes of her conversation with Jake replayed like a looped melody, each note a reminder of the personal revelations they had shared. She found herself sitting at the kitchen table, poring over sketchpad after sketchpad, her fingers stained with charcoal and ink. Art had always been her refuge, a world where she could channel her emotions into something tangible. Yet faced with the prospect of showcasing her work, that refuge now felt like an exposed nerve. The thrill of vulnerability she had felt earlier seemed to be slipping away, replaced by a gnawing fear of inadequacy. What if her art painted a portrait of who she once was? a mere reflection trapped in a cycle of despair. She could already hear the whispering voices of doubt amalgamating into a crescendo. What if they don't see your worth? What if they judge you? Determined not to let the voice win, she scoured her memories for the last time she felt truly confident. As she reminisced about art classes in high school, a light of inspiration sparked within her. It was the last time she allowed herself to be raw and vulnerable. Asking for feedback was the ultimate test of trust. Resolved, Maggie penned an email to Jake late that night, revealing her desire to host an informal art session, a raw exploration of both their crafts. Dogged determination fueled her words. "Let's sketch our truths," she wrote. "I want to capture moments of honesty, even the painful ones." To her surprise, the next morning, Jake replied almost immediately, enthusiasm echoing through the text. "Count me in," he typed, along with playful tone emojis that bled any remnants of their previous serious discussion. The days leading up to their session passed in a blur of nervous energy. Each time the doorbell rang, her stomach twisted with anticipation. Would he show up? How much would he reveal? Instead of the dread she feared, every moment felt charged with the promise of growth, a new chapter unfolding before her. On the fateful evening, the small table in the center of her apartment was piled high with art supplies. Maggie paced like a caged animal, rehearsing her thoughts as she waited. When Jake finally arrived, he seemed different, his gaze bright with an eagerness she hadn't seen before. "Let's dive in. No holding back, right?" he declared, cracking a wide smile that radiated warmth, easing the tension. They began with simple sketches, charcoals gliding over the smooth paper as they exchanged light banter. But as Jake's pencil drifted, his demeanor shifted, mirroring her own internal struggles. Halfway through, he hesitated. "You know," he whispered as he glanced at her half-finished piece, "I thought acting was exposing myself, but this—" He paused, shaken by the honesty of his thoughts. "This feels different." Maggie, sensing the shift in energy, laid her pencil down. "What's different about it?" His eyes darted away momentarily, revealing a tender vulnerability she had come to recognize. "I've spent so much time hiding, performing for the camera, that I've forgotten what painting my truth feels like." That admission rang true in the silence that followed, each of them caught in the web of their shared fears. They began delving into deeper subjects, exploring the overlapping threads of anxiety and insecurity that united them in this creative act. With every brushstroke and every vulnerability shared, a new layer of understanding was forged. Then something shifted within Maggie. She realized this was more than just an art session, it was a sanctuary, a resolute step toward asserting her identity. With each revelation, she began to unearth hidden competencies she hadn't noticed. The confidence she experienced while collaborating with Jake revealed talents that had been masked beneath a lifetime of self-doubt. She never considered herself a teacher, but her raw encouragement turned into empowering lessons for both of them. As the canvases filled with their truths, the evening morphed into an exploration of the self, challenging their perceptions of worth and ability. Yet as Maggie wiped her sweaty palms on her jeans, a question buzzed in the back of her mind. Were they truly ready to confront the shadows that lurked beyond their artistic endeavors? At the end of the night, with ink and paint smudged across tired hands and exhilarated hearts, Maggie felt both anticipation and dread. The process of unveiling truths had transformed something within her, but could they sustain this transformation? Could the journey lead them deeper into their individual paths without irrevocably damaging the fragile bond they had begun to forge? As they admired their collaborative pieces, a messy tapestry of hope and fear, Maggie caught a glimpse of her own reflection in the paint-splattered glass. The revelation that lay ahead seemed daunting but necessary. Would they both hold on to their newfound courage, or would the act of creation soon crumble beneath the weight of discomfort? Their laughter faded into the night, leaving a lingering silence that felt both exciting and fragile. Tomorrow would surely pose new challenges, and she could only hope that in confronting them, they could both emerge unscathed. Maggie's heart raced as the sun spilled over the horizon the next morning, illuminating the chaotic remnants of the previous night. The canvases, symbols of both their struggles and triumphs, stood leaning against the wall, coated in layers of emotion. It all felt surreal, a world of color and connections that forced her to confront her fears head-on. Yet as she moved to prepare her morning coffee, a wave of anxiety crashed over her. What did it mean to hold on to this new sense of self? With each sip, Maggie replayed the transformative moments captured in those sketches. Jake's confession stirred her. It opened paths leading to untold truths she had buried deep. She felt compelled to not only reflect on them, but to go beyond, to truly unleash her artistic expression. Today was a test. Could she leap into this newfound resolve? Fueled by a sense of purpose, her fingers trembled with anticipation as she began sketching again. The charcoal danced across the page, forming lines filled with unguarded emotion. What if they could delve deeper than the surface? What if these explorations led to revelations that reshaped their journeys forever? It took a moment, but inspiration struck, a recurring theme in her art, the contrast between light and shadow, reassurance and fear. Later that afternoon, she texted Jake suggesting they meet again. "Let's push boundaries. I want to capture raw emotion, the good and the bad." In her mind, it was a challenge, an invitation to cast aside pretense. The response came almost instantly. "I'm in. Let's do this." Each exchange solidified their growing bond, yet underneath her excitement lay an unsettling fear. Would this session invite repercussions they weren't prepared to face? When Jake arrived, there was an electric tension in the air. He wore a heavy expression that amplified Maggie's apprehension. "Aren't you excited?" she asked him, trying to lighten the mood. "I am," he replied, but the furrow in his brow suggested otherwise. "But I can't help but wonder, what happens when everything we try to express falls flat? What if our truths aren't enough?" His doubt reverberated through Maggie, igniting both sympathy and resolve. "Maybe that's the point," she ushered. "We explore ourselves fully, regardless of the outcome. Let's create art that isn't meant for approval, just honesty." They settled into silence, the evening air thick with anticipation as they began. Pastels in hand, they abandoned structured techniques in favor of an instinctive flow. It was liberating, but the stillness also cloaked the uncertainty that simmered beneath the surface. Each stroke unveiled nuances they had not previously dared to portray, and eventually, vulnerability rendered the creative atmosphere palpable. Jake drew through the fog of his fears, capturing fleeting moments of beauty framed by dark edges. Maggie marveled at how his art echoed deeply personal struggles. In her own depiction, jagged lines met vibrant hues, depicting a journey toward inner strength. With every shared glance and muttered word of encouragement, they emboldened each other's resolve. But with every glowing brushstroke, the shadows loomed larger. Were they truly revealing their essence, or were they merely skimming the surface, afraid to plunge into darker depths? The session escalated into a kaleidoscope of emotion, and just as Maggie felt a surge of confidence, she noticed Jake's hands shaking, his passion battling against something greater, fear of exposure. "What if this backfires?" he admitted, the tremor in his voice palpable. "What if I can't handle what's released?" His vulnerability mirrored her own coping mechanisms and reminded her of her internal struggles. In that moment, she had a revelation. What was at stake here was not just art, but their very identities. They had stepped into an unknown realm of possibilities, bound in their shared quest for authenticity. As they stepped back to survey their evolving pieces, Maggie became acutely aware of the conflicting emotions swirling around them. The art had taken on forms they didn't anticipate, revealing a mosaic of their insecurities. "Maybe we aren't just artists," she proposed tentatively. "We're explorers." Jake's gaze pierced hers. "But what if exploration reveals things we aren't ready to face?" As the evening wore on, time slipped away, and with it, the precarious balance between newfound bravery and lingering fear. Maggie glanced at Jake, anticipation twisting in her gut. If they kept unveiling their truths, would they emerge transformed or fractured by the weight of their findings? When their brushes finally fell silent, they stood on the precipice of discovery. The air felt thick with unspoken promises and fears yet to confront. Tomorrow, a confrontation loomed on the horizon, and she couldn't shake the feeling they were meant to face it together, no matter the costs. Could they crack open the doors to their hidden depths, or were some shadows too heavy to lift? Maggie woke the next day with the sky still painted in twilight, her mind swirling with unresolved thoughts. Art had never felt so raw, so powerful, as it did in the dim light of that early hour. Each brushstroke, each sketch from the previous night played like a haunting melody in her head, reverberating with questions she feared to ask. What if exposure to their hidden depths would fracture not just their art, but their very selves? She slid out of bed, heart racing as she thought of their next session. They had agreed to meet again to dig deeper into their vulnerabilities, but fear gnawed at her. What truths would they unearth, and would they be prepared to endure the fallout? Her stomach knotted, a visceral reminder of how delicate their journey had become. Maggie paused to glance in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back felt strong, but doubt lurked behind her resolve. Transformations are never straightforward. They come with an array of light and shadow that often disrupt any sense of clarity. Was she strong enough to deal with her revelations? What if what she discovered about herself shattered her image of the person she thought she had become? As she brewed another cup of coffee, her thoughts drifted to Jake, his art, his struggles, the profound connection they shared. The melding of their artistic journeys was more than mere collaboration. It was an exploration of their innermost battles. Yet she feared what they would leave unexamined in the process. Later she gathered her materials, feeling anxious anticipation pulse through her. Stepping into the studio, the air shimmered with creativity, but there was an uncanny stillness. Jake arrived soon after, his presence filling the space with an energy that both thrilled and terrified her. "Maggie," he said, the weight of unspoken words heavy in his voice. "Last night, it felt different. I couldn't stop thinking about how everything we've created is mixed with our fears." She nodded, sensing the tension between them. "It is, but maybe we can embrace that. We have to allow the fear to be a part of our expression. Let's just channel it into our art." With that, they settled into a comfortable silence, the pastels lined up like soldiers ready for battle. The moment felt monumental. As their hands began to move, creating lines and shapes, Maggie let the anxiety flow through her brush, merging it with the colors around her. With each deep hue she pushed onto the canvas, she confronted her fears. Her insecurities loomed like specters, but she felt them dissolve within the strokes. Jake, on the other hand, wrestled with his emotions. His previous flicker of inspiration darkened as hesitation seeped in, tainting his vision. "I don't know, Maggie," he said, halting mid-stroke. "What if we expose something we can't handle?" "Perhaps we will," she replied, her voice steady with determination. "But that's art. It's powerful because it's unpredictable. The beauty rises from the chaos." He studied her, visibly torn between admiration and trepidation. She wondered if he felt the courage that surged through her, or was it barely extinguished beneath layers of trepidation? They forged ahead, infusing their pieces not just with skill but with the weight of their vulnerabilities. Maggie's palette brightened as she surrendered deeper to the shadows of fear she painted. Each brushstroke became an act of defiance against her self-doubt. She dared herself to breathe life into the dark corners of her psyche. But as the time passed, so did their optimism. As they surveyed the canvases one more time, a sickening tension settled in the air. Their once vibrant creations now echoed with uncertainty, each piece a reflection of the raw heartache they sought to express. "Maybe we've gone too far," Jake whispered, his eyes wide. "What if we lose ourselves in this process?" Maggie stepped back, heart pounding. Isn't that the risk? To lose ourselves in order to find a truer version of who we are? Before she could respond, a realization hit her like a bolt of lightning. Their artistic journey was no longer just about finding themselves through creation. They were on the brink of a deeper discovery that might tear them apart. Maggie faced Jake, their breaths mingling as intensity rippled between them. "We're both at a crossroads. Do we keep exploring each other's depths, or do we retreat before it gets too dangerous?" Her question hovered in the air, heavy and unresolved. The air thickened with anticipation, an unsaid plea for answers. They stood teetering on the edge of transformation, bound by an understanding that risk was inherent in creation. But would they have the strength to face the consequences of their truths together? With uncertainty lurking, the moment of decision arrived. Would they embrace the chaos, or would fear lead them back into the shadows? Maggie stood still, her heart racing. The weight of her words lingered in the air, thickening the silence around them. Could they really explore the depths of their souls, or was it merely a desire for artistic bravery? Each option lay before them like the vibrant colors on their canvases, waiting to be brought to life. Jake, visibly shaken, withdrew slightly, his gaze flickering between her and the canvases. "Maggie, it's not just about art," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's about who we become in the process." Her chest tightened. She had never thought of it that way. Art as a mirror reflecting their changing selves, a beautiful yet terrifying concept. Then let's see what we're capable of. Let's be honest in what we create. Isn't that the whole point? He hesitated, his eyes shadowed with doubt, but something in her expression shifted the balance. Maybe it was her determination, so palpable and undeniable. Whatever it was, it ignited a flicker of courage within him. "Okay," he agreed, but no holding back. As they picked up their brushes, a fresh resolve enveloped the studio. The once familiar colors began to feel foreign and alive. Each stroke was fraught with emotion, a dance of fear and exhilaration as they let abstractions replace the images in their minds. For Maggie, the colors blended into chaotic yet breathtaking forms, reflecting indistinct memories and aspirations clashing within her heart. Jake seemed to transform as well. Lines became sharper, the shadows more pronounced, as if his inner turmoil unfurled in every movement. There was a ferocity in his expression, a willingness to confront whatever lay beneath the surface. Maggie watched with awe as his art began to morph. It was as if both their energies intertwined, creating something greater than the sum of their individual struggles. Yet as they lost themselves in creation, the looming specter of their fears clung to the edges of the studio. There was a comfort in the chaos, but obscured just out of reach lay the uncertainty they had both acknowledged. Hours passed unnoticed. Their canvases transformed into vivid, frenetic depictions of raw vulnerability, each whispering untold stories. But with every completed stroke came a rising apprehension, the excitement pixelated by unacknowledged truths. Pausing, Maggie stepped back to observe what they had birthed. The colors glimmered, but beneath the surface the anguish started to surface, raw and unsettling. "Jake, do you see this?" she asked, her heart hammering. "It's beautiful and terrifying all at once." He nodded, his brow furrowed. "It feels alive," he acknowledged, as if grappling with the implications of their creations. "But it also feels exposed. Maybe that's what we're supposed to do. Expose what we hide," she replied, her voice steady again. But the more they discussed it, the more Maggie worried that they were unearthing parts of themselves that weren't ready to see the light. Was there a limit to self-exposure? Could they bear what they might discover if they pushed deeper? The question clawed at her, a relentless itch she couldn't ignore. "Where do we go from here?" Jake asked, the flicker of fear returning to his eyes. "Can we really handle the truth of our vulnerabilities?" "It's not about what we can handle, Jake," Maggie replied, her voice barely above a murmur. "It's about whether we're willing to confront it." A long silence hung between them, fraught with tension and unspoken arguments that ricocheted through their minds. Finally, as Maggie turned to the canvas again, she realized that their work was now so intertwined with their emotional turmoil that retreat was not an option. They stood ready to dive headfirst into the depths, but as her fingers brushed against the texture of the canvas, a gnawing doubt remained. Were they pushing toward liberation or calamity? Outside the studio, the sun began to set, casting shadows that danced across their creations. The door creaked as it swung open, sending a breeze that seemed to whisper warnings of the truths yet to be unveiled. "Let's finish this tonight," she said. a strange determination boiling within her. This is just the beginning. But as she gathered her colors, Maggie couldn't shake the feeling that their journey might lead them to unexpected destinations, places not included in their plans. What awaited them beneath the surface remained shrouded in mystery and fear, pushing them onward into darker realms. Would the revelations they uncovered cement their bond, or tear it apart before it solidified? And then came the realization like a sudden jolt. What if their art became a vessel for not just their fears but also their very identities? What would happen when their truths spilled over their canvases and seeped into their lives? The clock ticked ominously in the background, counting down the moments before they faced the fury of self-discovery. Maggie took a deep breath, her heart still thudding in her chest. She could feel a swirling storm of emotions coursing through her veins, a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. The canvases before her were not mere art. They had become battlegrounds in which her inner conflicts would fight for supremacy. Each brushstroke was a step toward vulnerability, a step closer to unveiling the hidden parts of herself she had skirted around for too long. "Let's get raw," she said, her voice almost reverberating against the studio walls. She squeezed a vibrant crimson paint onto her palette, the color a representation of her passion, her anger, and her fear. It called to her, demanding to be unleashed. As she layered the paint onto the canvas, her thoughts shifted to the past, those shadowy whispers of doubt and insecurity that had beset her journey in the art world. What if she faltered? What if this endeavor revealed a version of herself that was unworthy? Would she regret stripping down her emotional facade? Each question tugged painfully, echoing the gnawing doubts that had pursued her career. But there it was, the beckoning thrill of possibility, the beauty of unearthing a deeper truth urging her along. Jake stood beside her, the air around him charged with his own mounting fear. "Maggie, what if we expose too much?" he asked, gripping his brush tightly as if it could somehow anchor him. "What if this changes everything?" She paused, her fingers hovering over the canvas. "Maybe that's exactly what this is about. We're not just creating art, we're evolving. Isn't that worth the risk?" The determination in her voice surprised even her. Could courage sprout from vulnerability? This experiment could shatter her into pieces or forge her anew. As they both painted feverishly, the atmosphere of the studio shifted. The clinking of paint tubes was a metronome to their racing hearts, underscoring the importance of this night. Maggie felt the colors melding, forming images that seemed to pulse with life. She was no longer just an artist, she was becoming a storyteller, one not afraid to narrate her chaos and confusion. Jake hesitated again, his brow knitted in concentration. The canvas before him was heavy with darkness, shadows that mirrored his uncertainty about himself, about life. She recognized his struggle and swallowed her instinctual desire to comfort him. He needed to face himself without her influence. This moment was not hers to shape. "Hey," she ventured gently, wanting to connect without losing the intensity of their work. "Just remember, this is a safe space. Whatever comes out doesn't define your worth. It's part of your journey." He glanced at her, the weight of her words hanging between them. There was a moment of silence before he nodded, a flicker of understanding passing through his eyes. The brushes flashed across the canvas, and for a moment time blurred. Hours slipped by, the outside world fading away until it was only the two of them, grappling with their inner demons through color and form. Every stroke became a defiant proclamation of pain, of hope, and above all of authenticity, of a. But as midnight approached and the flickering light bulbs began to dim, a morbid thought crept into Maggie's mind. What if revealing their truths wasn't liberating at all? What if this raw honesty birthed something unmanageable, reckless even? Simultaneously, she felt invigorated by self-doubt, recognized it as part of the crucible of transformation. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the back of the studio, the sound breaking through her focus and sending both Maggie and Jake jolting. Startled, they exchanged looks filled with dread and curiosity. What could possibly disrupt this sanctuary of creation? As they turned their heads toward the source of the noise, an insistent question began to spiral through her mind. What if the truths they were wrestling with weren't just internal, but were somehow external as well? The uncharted territories of their emotional exploration might be unlocking more than just their vulnerabilities. Maggie's pulse quickened again, but this time it carried the weight of anticipation. Whatever the disturbance was, it promised a confrontation, one that would either bind them closer or compel them to face fears they hadn't even begun to acknowledge. And with that, she felt the storm brewing not just within her, but looming outside, echoing the tumult they were about to confront. Would they weather it together, or would it tear them apart? The threshold of realization was upon them, and Maggie could hardly breathe in the wake of that impending revelation. As the sound of shattering glass faded into an unsettling silence, Maggie's instinct kicked in, igniting an acute awareness of her surroundings. She instinctively scanned the studio, her heart drumming a frantic beat against her ribcage. The vibrant art that encircled her now felt like a suffocating cocoon. What had moments ago been a sanctuary of creativity suddenly morphed into a space charged with ominous uncertainty. Jake tensed beside her, his brush dropping from his hands with a clatter that echoed through the studio. "Do you think—" he started, uncertainty palpable in his voice. "Should we check?" The question hung there, heavy and unanswered. Here they were, at the fringes of emotional exploration, only to be confronted with an external force that threatened to derail their cathartic journey. But Maggie felt an unsettling thrill. That external force might be the catalyst they needed. "We need to know what it is," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. She inhaled deeply, rallying the remnants of her courage. The canvas awaited her truth, and perhaps the interruption signified something more, a call to face the parts of themselves they had yet to explore. She led the way, her heart racing as she made her way toward the source of the noise. What if it was something dangerous? Or what if it was merely a forgotten shelf collapsing under the weight of the past? Either way, they had to confront it. As they approached the back room, the flickering lights dimmed and flickered more violently, casting elongated shadows that seemed to dance erratically across the walls. Maggie glanced at Jake, who followed her closely, his face pale with trepidation. But here, within this vulnerable moment, she sensed the alliance between them strengthening. They pushed the door open slowly, tension crackling in the air. The sight that met them was unexpected, a shattered mirror sprinkled with shards reflecting fragmented images, each piece distorting their realities. "What the—" Jake murmured, stepping into the room cautiously. "This is weird," Maggie mused, her brow furrowing with contemplation. It felt less like a mere accident, and more like a manifestation of their internal struggle. The mirror shards seemed to symbolize how they had fractured their perceptions of themselves and each other. "Maybe we should just clean it up," Jake suggested, the practicality grounding them in the face of what felt like surreal chaos. But even as he said it, Maggie's instincts pulled her in another direction. "Wait, we need to look at this first." She knelt beside a piece of the mirror, its jagged edge glinting under the dim light. As she peered into it, she caught a glimpse of herself, a host of fears and desires coiled within her eyes, reminders of every self-doubt she had battled. "This is not about cleaning it up," Maggie said, a realization dawning on her. "It's a reflection, Jake. These pieces are part of us." Her voice trembled with a mixture of clarity and vulnerability. "We've tried to hide these parts, but we have to face them." Jake looked at her, uncertainty battling with curiosity. "You mean, sit with our fears?" "Yes," she replied firmly. "It's time to address who we are, fully. Just like on the canvas, this might be what we're supposed to confront." At that moment, surrounded by shards of glass and vulnerability, a decision loomed before her. The choice wasn't just about taking the next step in their artistic journey. It was about the courage to look in the mirror, to accept their complex selves, even if it felt terrifying. Would they be brave enough to reconstruct their identities from the broken pieces surrounding them? The atmosphere shifted, thickening with the weight of this imminent challenge. As Maggie wrestled with her newfound determination, a question arose, the urgency penetrating the air. Would embracing their fragmented selves lead to transformation, or would it overwhelm them, shattering the concept of who they believed themselves to be. And as they stood there staring at the chaos before them, Maggie wondered with swelling anticipation what new revelations would emerge through the confrontation of their inner darkness. The denouement of their artistic journey was rapidly shaping itself, and the paths ahead were now poised for discovery. Maggie took a breath, feeling both the weight of the moment and the flicker of clarity igniting within her. She was no longer simply a girl from a diner or a struggling artist. She was a force navigating the complexity of her own existence. The jagged glass shards reflected different versions of herself, fragments of dreams, fears, and truths, all begging to be acknowledged and integrated. "Let's pick them up," she declared, determination echoing through her words. "Each piece tells a story. Every shard is a part of our journey. We have to put them back together." Her voice rang with conviction, urging Jake to understand the magnitude of what they stood to gain by embracing their vulnerabilities. Jake hesitated only for a heartbeat. "Okay," he relented, an ember of courage flickering in his eyes. "But let's be careful." They began to collect the fragments together, their fingers brushing against the sharp edges while at the same time feeling the potency of their choices. With each shard gathered, they became more determined to piece together the collage of their truths. As they cleaned the space, Maggie felt her heart race with anticipation. The act became more than just tidiness. It became a metaphor for their lives, a commitment to assembling their identities from the chaos. Each shard they carefully set aside, transformed into a tangible representation of their struggles. Every insecurity, battle, and dream that had once fissured them apart, but now bound them in a shared narrative of redemption. Jake caught her eye as they worked, a tentative smile hinting at his growing acceptance. "I think we've both been running from these pieces for so long, afraid we'd cut ourselves if we touched them," he said quietly, his expressions shifting from fear to understanding. "That's it," Maggie affirmed, energy radiating from her. "This is our chance to confront them, to understand and ultimately redefine what these parts mean. By accepting their vulnerabilities, they could reclaim their narratives." With the room now cleared of the broken pieces, Maggie and Jake faced one another, standing together amidst the remnants of fear, their shoulders squared in newfound confidence. "Let's create something new," Maggie proposed, her voice steady. "A collaborative piece that honors our individual journeys, acknowledges our fears, yet celebrates our courage to face them." Their canvases awaited, blank and full of potential. As they picked up their brushes, the air crackled with intention. Each stroke began to breathe life into their visions, blending chaos with beauty, laughter with trepidation. Maggie poured her soul into the canvas as she wove colors that fused remnants of her past into landscapes of hope and ambition. The shadows she had once feared now transformed into vibrant expressions of identity, chaotic, yet breathtakingly alive. Next to her, Jake worked feverishly, his brush gliding smoothly, forming forms that evolved with every stroke, wrapping around feelings he had hidden beneath his celebrity facade. Together, they created a landscape of emotion, raw, enigmatic, and stunning in its authenticity. The canvas became a testament to their journey, a visual representation of their growth and acceptance. Their artistic exploration culminated in breathless peaks of creation, bonding them tighter with each canvas they molded. No longer were they simply two disparate individuals. They had become co-creators, sharing the transformative journey with authenticity at the forefront. Eventually, as they stepped back to admire their work, a breathless silence enveloped the studio. The canvases shone brightly in the sunlight that poured through the windows, revealing a synergy of both light and dark, celebration and defeat. For the first time, Maggie felt a true sense of belonging within herself, the girl from the diner, the artist empowered by her past and present. The exploration of truth had not only solidified her identity, but also revolutionized her aspirations. She had overcome the self-doubt that had woven itself into her fabric, and instead emerged as a testament to resilience and courage. Both their hearts echoed the triumph of creative vulnerability, and as they tightened their bond through shared struggles and triumphs, they also fortified their belief in themselves. In the days that followed, Maggie found herself in a new arena. She began to showcase her art professionally, recognized for her authentic expression and compelling narrative. The whispers of admiration from patrons carried her confidence further, and she earned accolades for her striking pieces, each a celebration of the struggle she had resolved to embrace. Equally, Jake discovered that stepping away from the script allowed him to find a truer voice. The honesty amplified in their collaboration empowered him to accept roles grounded in real human experiences, underscoring his journey of self-discovery. The connection they nurtured reaffirmed his worth beyond fame and fortune, rooted in the authenticity they had both cultivated. Together, they stood at the edge of this new chapter, proud of how far they had come. As they reflected on their artistic partnership, they knew that the journey had sculpted their identities far beyond their initial selves. Maggie thrived in her new roles as both an artist and advocate for authenticity, forging a path for others to embrace their insecurities and transform them into powerful narratives. The diner's shadows faded further into the past, replaced by the invigorating light of her ambitions. In this final evolution, they solidified their recognition, not just among their peers but within themselves. Each achievement, every moment of honesty, continually reaffirmed the strength of their bond and the worth of their stories. As they stepped into their futures, the echoes of their journey reverberated, proof that art could heal, that vulnerability fosters connection, and that life's struggles could become its greatest stories. To anyone watching, seize your potential, embrace the chaos, and explore your truths. You need to subscribe now to ensure you don't miss more exclusive emotional stories like this one. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and uplift our community. Comment below with your thoughts on the journey and your own experiences with overcoming adversity. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who could use a dose of inspiration to conquer their own challenges.